Thanks, everyone. So I'll focus on the value of flexibility, basically to outline how that value is going to give you the potential to reduce your energy costs. And to start off with that, I will basically outline the various value sources, because it's not a single source of value that comes from flexibility. There's many ways to create that value from flexibility, and each way has its own characteristics and requirements, both from operational value and organizational perspective. It's important to weigh up those characteristics and how they suit your process, the technology available, and your business. And in addition, some value sources can be stacked while others are mutually exclusive. So as an example, if you have committed your demand response to a demand response service provider, you can't then also bid that same capacity into the RERT that's run by EMO, because they kind of do the same thing. So if you've already committed that demand response capability, you can't then use it again. On the other hand, you can combine a load shifting program with a demand response program, where a daily program of load shifting can be overlaid with a response to high prices. So just running through those value sources, FCAS, or frequency control services, basically help EMO manage the frequency of the grid. There is load shifting and peak shaving, which basically shifts your consumption to a cheaper time of the day. There's demand response, where you bid your capacity into various schemes or reduce your demand when prices are extremely high. The reliability and emergency reserve trader is a program run by EMO, where they basically get people to bid in the price they need to reduce their consumption, which can actually be higher than the maximum price on the spot market. And basically then they tell you when to turn off, which can be a lot more manual than some of the other ways. And then finally, there's network support, where either you respond to a peak demand charge, or you actually have a contract with a network to more regularly reduce your demand when the network requires it. So with the rise of renewable energy, that is becoming a key driver for the need for flexibility, and one of the key drivers of the value of flexibility. With the renewable energy transition rapidly gathering pace in the next few years, we're starting to see increasing amounts of renewable energy into the grid, and to manage the highs and lows in output of that renewable energy, we're likely to see highs and lows of energy prices, and therefore we're starting to see more and more value in being able to shift your consumption across the day and across multiple days, as you can see there in the modeling, or the chart that's from our modeling, where we project the amount of generation from various sources into the future. So another driver of the value of flexibility is regulatory changes. I think I'm stuck on the same slide, I know.
We got you on.
Jared, can you just confirm for me that I'm actually showing?
Slide 4. We can see slide 4, Jasper.
Okay, thanks. That's good because my other screen is not showing that. Anyway, so yes, another driver of the value of flexibility is changing market rules. Recently, the very fast FCAS market went live, or fast frequency response, which basically rewards a quicker response to changes in frequency. And especially some of the loads can actually be quite are quite compatible with that service. So loads that are actually quite able to change rapidly or quite easily controlled, and can therefore actually be rewarded for the faster response that they can provide compared to a more traditional generator. Obviously, they'll have to compete with batteries, but that's a key driver for value in the FCAS market. However, more recently, on the more traditional markets, the AEMC has confirmed its final determination for the market price cap, which will now rapidly increase over the next few years to nearly 28,000 by our projections by 2028. So that's from July 2027. So in the chart there, I've shown basically Victorian energy prices on 13 February this year, when the Loy Yang power station shut down after a transmission issue where towers fell over somewhere else in Victoria. And as a result, we had prices at the market price cap for nearly 2 hours. So a 1 megawatt capacity of demand response during those 2 hours would have received around $33,000 basically this year. However, by 2028, they would receive nearly $55,000. So there's a clear change in the value of flexibility over that time frame, and it might mean that a process that is currently doesn't necessarily make sense, or is hard to recover the value of, or the investment might not justify it currently. In a few years' time, it may be much more attractive to provide that demand response. And finally, basically another driver from the changing market rules, and a reason why the market rules to some extent are changing as well, is that we're seeing more generation basically contracted. So the renewable generation is contracted to PPAs, which means that some of the renewable generators are not quite as responsive to market prices, depending on the terms of those PPAs. However, for an energy consumer, it's quite important to make sure that prices that you consume when prices are low, because that reduces the cost of firming that renewable generation around it. Because obviously, the more we rely on generators, the higher the overall price will be. Because when we use generators for very small amounts of time, basically they need to be paid enough to be in the grid. And if we can reduce that amount of generation that's required, it will really help to keep overall costs down. So this chart here shows how prices have changed with the transition that's been happening over the last few years. So we're comparing prices at a half-hourly level in 2020 across a day, on average across the year, with the same price profile for 2023. And what you can see is that the value that are in the middle of the day is actually turned negative in some states, whereas the evening peak prices have soared. And it's really giving a clear sense of how flexibility would give you a lot more value in 2023 compared to 2020. And with the transition that we're in, we're likely to see that continue, and therefore, and especially with the change in the market price cap, that evening peak on average may actually increase further. So then moving on to how to implement that flexibility. So when you're thinking about the flexibility, it's really important to think about what is the value, what is required to implement the value source that you're looking to do, how does it work for each value source. There's very different ways it can work. For instance, for FCAS, you need an automated system. It's too quick to have somebody go for a button, whereas on the other hand, for RERT, you can actually kind of get a signal and have enough time to turn it down less or in a less automated way. Another key question that you need to think about is what organizational support is required. Especially depending on your process, you will have to make sure that the people that run that process are actually comfortable with what you're doing. So for instance, if you need to turn on an emergency generator, is that going to create a problem because there is a switchover from grid to emergency power? And can the processes that you're running internally actually cope with that switchover? Or are you going to be in the dark for some period of time because some lights need time to warm up? So it's clear that there is a lot of things to think about. So there's some examples that are good resources for load shifting. There's microgrids. There's heat and cold storage that can provide opportunities. Hot water systems are a very good thing that can be used. Obviously, pumping loads and batteries, depending on the flexibility around the pumping load. So then in particular on how to extract the value, there is demand response programs run by retailers, but there's also demand response providers. Many retailers these days are running virtual power plants that you can subscribe to. You can actually have spot exposure in your retail contract. And then finally, one of the less efficient ways is to actually change your load that you submit to your retailer as part of your retail contract. And that might create or reflect some value if you change your consumption in a certain way to lower cost periods. Retailers will value that as part of the retail contract. However, when you go on, when you implement a program like that, it is very important to thoroughly analyze all the implication, risks, values, but also when you enter into a contract with a service provider, you need to carefully consider how the value is shared, but also what obligations you are taking on. Because depending on the kind of program you're going on, there will be obligations and you may be required to compensate someone if you don't follow through on that commitment. So finally, I will discuss a few practical things or case studies and talk a little bit about some practical stuff that we've done. it is important to consider that past prices are not always an accurate reflection of future prices. We've had a few years with substantial periods of high prices. In early 2020, we had some periods of very high prices, and obviously during the winter of 2022. And those periods may not be replicated in the future. So it's very important when considering whether an investment is appropriate to consider whether, how likely it is that those things will happen again in the future. And also you don't want to overpromise internally what kind of value your program is going to create. So to help with that, we use our own proprietary forecast to help people value their demand response capability or the value of shifting their energy consumption, and that can then help to support a business case or stakeholder buy-in. So with those, so one of the things we have done in the past is, and that we're actually doing currently, is support a large manufacturing business who actually has the option to decide quarterly whether they want to be on a load following or a non-load following retail contract. And as part of that, if they're non-load following, they can actually use their DR and take profit from that. On the other hand, when they do that, they're more exposed to the spot market. And we basically help them weigh that up on a quarterly basis. One of the concerns with that, obviously, is how volatile is it, and do they actually have the capability to respond to the amount of volatility that is expected. And with our forecast, we help them get their head around that. So similarly, we have helped a customer value or quantify the value and risk around their demand response capability. Basically, that's helped them develop a business case that they are now considering what they actually need to do to further develop that demand response capability. Finally, although this is not all the projects that we've done, but yes, but another final example is that we've helped someone with an electrification program to basically value how managing or using the storage within that program could help them, or a storage option in that program, how that could help them reduce their energy cost. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jasper. Thank you so much. And if anyone's got a question for Jasper, please pop that in there. I might kick off with one. I'll get you to stop sharing there, Jasper. Well, I saw you had $400 per megawatt hour, that evening peak for 2023, and you think that evening peak is going to get more, Jasper. I thought with these Waratah super batteries and things coming in, maybe that's going to alleviate a bit of that cost in the peak in the evening. You sort of still think this is going to continue on?
Well, I mean, on the other hand, we've got Araring coming out as well. There we go. I think you've stopped my share screen.
I have.
Thank you. Because yes, I was kind of stuck in that. Anyway, we've got Araring coming out. We've got other dispatchable generation coming out. So regardless, I think there will be times with more volatility. I mean, just today or yesterday, we had volatility in Queensland. with prices spiking. So there will be more challenges here and there, basically where we have periods of high and low renewable output, along with tightness in the grid. We've been, just the last 6 months, supply has been pretty good, where all the coal-fired generation has been running very consistently, and that's created some low prices. But basically, with fewer coal-fired generators in the grid, we will get more challenges from time to time when things are tight, like in 2022, and also things like the RERT battery. Most of the batteries are still relatively short duration, so I do think that there will be events, and you can't always accurately forecast, and that's why we use a range of outcomes, because basically this year we've got an El Nino, and in Victoria it's actually not been as hot as expected. On the other hand, in Queensland it's been very warm. But next year there is some suggestions we might go back to La Nina. So you just you can't expect that same outcome to happen every year, and that's why it's good to have a range of outcomes that you're considering, both from the upper end of the risk as well as the lower end, so that you don't have unrealistic expectations about the value that you might create.
Gotcha. Brendan, we've got a few questions coming in.
Sure. So we have one. It's quite a simple one. It says that the RERT program seems to be quite an unreliable income stream. It's just after Jasper's opinion on that one.
I think, look, the RERT program, the key thing about the RERT program is that you don't have a lot of control yourself. You're basically sitting there waiting for a call from EMO, and it doesn't happen every year. So if you want to get value out of your flexibility, it's good if you basically have some capacity that you're happy to provide, but you're not that keen to use all the time. But yeah, basically if you want regular value, there's probably other options that are going to provide you a better or a more consistent return.
Sure. There's one more question here on 2 hours out from the event, looking at forward prices, how likely is it those prices would actually be realized? So I guess that's a very broad question, but yeah, at a high level, how often does it hit the actual price? So
it varies a lot. So obviously, like a great example is the Loy Yang outage, where basically there was no notice at all. Basically, it happened, and 2 hours after that event, the prices were at the maximum, at the price cap of 16,600. Other days, like yesterday, I think there was actually high prices forecast, but they didn't happen exactly as forecast. And a key reason for that is that generators change their bidding all the time. And basically, depending on their contract position and their exposure to the spot market, they may change their bidding to either increase the impact of high prices or actually basically push the high prices out of the market because they're actually exposed to the spot price. And basically, you just got to be flexible enough and not always expect it to happen. Now, I know that, for some businesses that can be quite difficult, but that's basically where ongoing advice or I suppose a partnership with a with a service provider can help you be either educated or basically take some of that burden out of your hand, where people are actually monitoring the market all the time, and are basically giving you good advice about how likely it is and whether you should be ready to act.